Imagine for a moment stepping into the shoes of those who came before us. Welcome to a journey that transforms history into vibrant stories that captivate and inspire. You stand under a heavy gray sky, drifting smoke from nearby hearths, curling above cracked stone rooftops. A goat wanders through a crumbling archway once paraded through by emperors. Streets that once bustled with senators and merchants now echo with the trudging of soldiers from foreign lands, some more interested in plunder than policy. You pass the forum, once the pulsing heart of an empire, now pockmarked with weeds and quiet as a grave. The marble is still there, but it's chipped and worn, covered with moss and opportunistic chickens. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to post your location and local time. I'm always curious where and when you're tuning in from. Wherever you are, I hope tonight brings you rest, comfort, and maybe a curious dream or two. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are in Rome in the year 476 CE. The air smells of ash and damp wool, and the locals speak in low tones, mostly Latin, though it's starting to sound a little weird, like Latin filtered through a bad medieval pop song. The Emperor Romulus Augustulus, bless his heart, is just a teenager. He didn't ask for any of this. He was put on the throne by his father, who was a general who was propped up by an army made up mostly of men who barely considered themselves Roman at all. And now that army has a new leader. His name is Odoacer. He's barbarian, though he's probably better dressed and more organized than half the senators these days. He marches into Rome, tells the young emperor to pack his things, and sends the imperial regalia like the purple cloak, eagle-topped scepter, and awkward political obligations back to Constantinople to Emperor Zeno in the east. And just like that, the Western Roman Empire's over. Except, not quite. You'd think this would be the part where everyone stands around blinking in confusion, maybe shaking their fists at the heavens, screaming, "Rome has fallen." But no, the baker down the road keeps baking. The tax collector still knocks at the door. People still argue over land deeds written in good old Roman script. Nothing really changes yet. In fact, it's possible that the average Roman didn't even know their empire had fallen. Odoacer, for his part, doesn't bother renaming much. He calls himself King of Italy, yes, but he keeps the Senate, keeps the Roman laws, even keeps paying a lot of people in solid those dependable little gold coins with a familiar imperial face stamped on one side. Historians still argue whether this was truly the end of the Western Empire or just a really long coffee break. Some say it was like watching a candle sputter out. Others insist it was more like your Wi-Fi slowly degrading until you can't stream gladiator fights anymore. But it didn't feel like collapse, not immediately. It felt more like drift. There are still schools that teach Roman rhetoric. Still aqueducts that work somewhat. Still roads that stretch out like ancient arteries trying to carry a pulse across a body long past its prime. You pass a group of old senators murmuring beneath the colonnade. Their togas are moth-eaten. They argue over legal technicalities in a world increasingly uninterested in law. One of them mutters about bringing back the glory days again. Another one dreams of getting an appointment in Constantinople where the real empire continues wrapped in Greek and incense and very pointy hats. And while you might think the empire's gone, its buildings still stand. Well, mostly. Some temples have become churches. Others are being stripped for their marble, which now lines the floors of suspiciously luxurious villas. One family has built their latrine into a corner of a bathhouse built by Hadrian. Very efficient. Quirky fact. In this twilight of empire, some Roman officials still issue decrees declaring things like the proper placement of statues of the goddess Roma. Meanwhile, outside the city walls, Germanic tribes are herding sheep through old Roman battlefields. And then there's the weird moment when a bishop Yes, a bishop claims more moral authority than any emperor alive or not. The Bishop of Rome, later called the Pope, starts wielding political power in quiet but steady ways. You see, while armies and emperors come and go, religion holds its grip with all the subtleness of a well-trained vice. By now, the line between Roman and not Roman has blurred to the point of comedy. Imagine being told you're no longer part of the Roman Empire while standing on a Roman road, holding Roman coins praying in Latin, and wearing a tunic your granddad bought at a Roman market. Awkward. But here's a curious twist. In Constantinople, Zeno doesn't even seem that bothered that Odoacer has taken over. He's got his own headaches, plagues, Persians, and a bureaucracy that could file your complaints in triplicate and lose all three copies. So for now, Western Europe drifts in this strange post-imperial limbo. Roman on the outside, barbarian on the inside, and still somehow familiar. You lie back on a patch of grass near the old forum. A lizard scurries over a piece of cracked Latin inscription. Above you, a crumbling triumphal arch casts a long shadow. The sun's setting on the eternal city, but no one told the sun it's over. It keeps shining anyway. And the empire, it doesn't fall. It fades. Slowly. Over centuries. The smoke from your campfire drifts lazily into the morning sky. It's not even a real fire, just a modest cooking pot on coals outside a tumble-down villa you're borrowing. Welcome to Italy under Odoacer, where the Roman Empire is technically dead, but everyone's still pretending it's on holiday. The strange thing is, Odoacer doesn't act like a conqueror. He doesn't strut around calling himself Caesar or throwing orgies in marble palaces. Instead, he issues edicts in Latin, collects taxes using Roman accounting, and even consults a senate, that bickering collection of toga-clad fossils. The old empire's machinery is still wheezing along, and Odoacer just grabs the controls. He wears Roman clothes, signs documents with Roman seals, issues coins with Roman eagles. The only real difference is the name on the top line, and let's be honest, the average tax filer probably doesn't notice. If your roof's leaking and grain's late, who cares which guy in a fancy chair signs the orders? And here's the kicker. Odoacer claims to be ruling on behalf of the Eastern Roman Emperor in Constantinople. That's right. He tells Emperor Zeno, "Hey, I deposed the Western boy emperor for you. You're the only real emperor now, so I'll just handle things over here." It's like firing the regional manager and having the assistant run the store while corporate shrugs and says, "Sure, just don't break anything." Historians still argue whether Odoacer was a usurper or a pragmatist. Was he dismantling Rome from within, or just doing what Romans had always done, adapting? You wander through Ravenna, Odoacer's capital, and it doesn't look like the end of the world. It's not the Rome of marble grandeur, but it's clean organized and oddly well defended. Bureaucrats still file things. Messengers still trot along the old roads, dodging potholes with a kind of trained grace. Then comes Theodoric. He's a different kind of barbarian and Ostrogoth raised in Constantinople. He speaks Latin, Greek, and Gothic. He knows how Roman courts work, and more importantly, he knows how to impress a Roman crowd. When Zeno grows tired of Odoacer, he sends Theodoric west with an awkward mission. Get rid of him, but keep things Roman. So Theodoric marches in. There's some fighting, of course. The final showdown is a bit dramatic. Odoacer invites Theodoric to a banquet to sign a peace treaty. Theodoric shows up, stabs Odoacer to death in front of everyone, and declares the banquet cancelled. Subtlety, not really a Gothic virtue. But what follows is strange Theodoric rules, like a Roman too. He builds basilicas, keeps the Senate around, and even funds public baths. His court includes Roman scholars, poets, and lawyers. He issues decrees in fluent Latin. And oddly, he tries to make sure the Goths and Romans get along without ever really mixing. One set of laws for Goths, another for Romans. One army for each. Two cultures awkwardly parallel like bad roommates sharing a kitchen. You sit on a bench in Ravenna's main square watching a Roman scribe argue with a Gothic soldier over a goat theft. They're using separate law scrolls and yelling in different dialects. Somehow it all works just barely. Quirky detail Theodoric was so obsessed with keeping things orderly that he once exiled a philosopher Boethius for writing the wrong kind of letters to Constantinople. He liked Roman tradition, as long as it didn't get too philosophical. You pass under a mosaic-covered dome in a Ravenna church. Above you is Christ flanked not by apostles but by Roman-looking men in imperial robes. The art is Gothic, but the symbolism deeply Roman. Even the urban layout still follows the Roman grid. You could drop an old Roman soldier here, and after the initial shock of the hairstyles, he'd probably know how to find the bathhouse. But even as Theodoric's kingdom hums along, cracks begin to show. Succession becomes messy. Factions stir. Religious tensions simmer. Theodoric is an Arian Christian, a version of Christianity that many Romans consider borderline heretical. The church in Rome, meanwhile, is getting feisty. Bishops now hold court, speak out against rulers, and generally act like emperors in all but name. And when Theodoric dies, things wobble. The Eastern Empire, now fully in its Byzantine groove, sees an opportunity. You might think Byzantines are totally separate from Romans by now, but no. They call themselves Romans. Their emperor is Basileus of the Romans. Their bureaucracy is an evolved Roman nightmare of scrolls, stamps, and secretaries. Their military is still drilling on tactics dreamed up by Caesar. Sure, they speak Greek, wear robes that look like curtains, and put Jesus on their coins, but in their heads, they are the Roman Empire. So when Emperor Justinian looks west and sees Italy ruled by Gothic kings who think heretical thoughts and speak the wrong Latin, he decides to act. Cue the Gothic Wars, a long, brutal, expensive attempt to pull Italy back into the Eastern Roman orbit. But that's another tale, bloody, glorious, and full of unintended consequences. For now you sit by a Roman aqueduct, water still trickling through ancient stone. The shadow of empire is long. Its echo stretches across mountains and mosaics, cloaks, and contracts. You pluck a coin from the dust. It bears the face of a long-dead emperor. Someone once paid a tax with this, maybe even bribed a senator. Now it's yours, still shiny, still Roman. The empire didn't fall. It just changed who answered the mail. You wake to the clop of hooves on stone somewhere between a Roman ruin and a half-finished Gothic fortress. The year is 493 CE, or maybe 530, or maybe no one really bothers counting anymore, unless a bishop writes it down. Calendars are getting fuzzy, titles blur. But one thing is certain, the land you walk through is still called Italy, and it still thinks of itself somehow as Roman. This is Theodoric's kingdom now, or what's left of it. Though he ruled with Roman flair and Gothic fire, his death has stirred up the pot. The once careful balance between Romans and Goths has started to tilt like a badly laid mosaic. The question now is not if there will be trouble, but who will get trampled when it breaks loose. You follow a merchant caravan rattling through Ravenna. They're carrying goods wrapped in linen, stamped with imperial insignias, heading toward towns that still bear Latin names. The signs are in Roman script. The contracts are sealed with wax bearing the eagle. And yet every voice you hear is a little off Latin, tangled with Gothic syllables, hints of Germanic syntax, murmurs of Church Latin bubbling beneath it all like a theological stew. Here's the thing, most people don't realize Theodoric's Italy wasn't a broken ruin. It was a Roman reboot with Gothic hardware. And for a time it actually worked. But Rome has a habit of attracting meddling. And that meddling is about to arrive in the very imperial form of Justinian the Firmons, sitting hundreds of miles away in glittering Constantinople, scheming in a palace with more gold leaf than sense. He's got dreams of uniting the Roman world under one rule, again his rule. Historians still argue whether Justinian was a visionary or a tyrant with delusions of Caesar. Some call him the last true Roman. Others call him the man who broke the Mediterranean economy trying to recreate a ghost. Either way, he's coming. But for now, you're in a curious limbo. The Gothic Kingdom of Italy is officially a Roman successor state. The Senate still meets. Roman law still governs disputes over property inheritance and how many sheep it takes to pay a fine for public urination. The Gothic kings even write letters to other kingdoms boasting that they're the new Rome. It's like watching someone wear their grandfather's uniform to a job interview. Nostalgic, mildly impressive, but ultimately out of date. Quirky tidbit. Even Gothic kings issued laws in Latin and sometimes used actual Roman law books from centuries earlier. Picture a warlord using a dusty copy of Cicero's Legal Ethics as a rulebook, and you've got the idea. You stroll into a crumbling amphitheater outside Naples where an argument has broken out. A Gothic judge is presiding. Two Roman landowners are shouting about irrigation ditches. One clutches a scroll quoting the Codex Theodosianus, a Roman legal code compiled nearly 100 years before. The judge sighs, mutters something about Latin grammar, and rules in favor of the one with the better sandals. Things still function. Not well, but function. Even the cities, while smaller, continue to buzz. Rome isn't a ghost town yet. It still has churches, bakeries, and pickpockets. Though the baths are quieter, the aqueducts patchier, and the rats bolder. Outside the cities, though, the old Roman countryside is morphing into something new. Vast estates once farmed by slaves now lie broken up among Gothic warriors. Villas crumble into barns. Olive trees go wild. Farmers wear tunics stitched from leftover military cloaks, and yet somehow the idea of Rome lingers like incense. A scribe in Milan still writes letters dated in the year of our Lord under the most glorious reign of King Theodoric, restorer of Roman peace. It's wishful thinking dressed up in calligraphy. You take shelter under a fallen temple's portico as rain begins to fall. Two travelers join you, one a Roman cleric with opinions about angels, the other a Gothic veteran with a limb and a wooden cross around his neck. They share bread and argue theology. Neither fully understands the other's Latin, but they get the gist. It's weirdly peaceful. That peace, however, is about to be shattered, because now Justinian makes his move. He dispatches a General Belisarius southward, sharp of mind, slick of beard, and loyal to a fault. Belisarius is sent to reclaim North Africa first, then Italy. Cue a war that would make even hardened legionaries blink. But here's where it gets tragic. Justinian's reconquest, what some call the Restitutio Imperii, or restoration of the empire, is successful and ruinous. Cities are sieged, starved, burned. The Gothic kingdom collapses in stages like a marble column struck repeatedly by a child with a chisel. You'll eventually see Rome sacked again, aqueducts destroyed, and whole regions depopulated. But that's down the road. Right now you stretch out in the dusk, the sound of rain easing to a hush. Somewhere nearby, a Roman widow teaches her grandson how to recite Virgil. In the distance, a Gothic chieftain prays to a Christian god in a language Caesar never spoke. It's a world between worlds. Roman but not. Dead but living. You can't help but feel it. You're not walking through ruins. You're walking through a memory pretending to be present. And it's not done pretending just yet. The sea wind from the Bosporus smells of salt and incense as you stroll through Constantinople's crowded avenues. It's the 6th century and the Eastern Roman Empire, what you'll eventually hear people call the Byzantine Empire, is alive, surprisingly functional, and blissfully unaware, it will one day be misunderstood by every high school student who thinks Rome ended in 476. This is the city of Justinian, the man who dreams of stitching the empire back together with silk law and the occasional war elephant. He doesn't call himself Byzantine. He's Roman, thank you very much. And his empire is the Roman Empire, just a little more Greek, a little more Christian, and a whole lot shinier. You pass beneath the arches of the Basilica of Hagia Sophia, still under construction. You can almost hear the shouting of workers, the creak of wooden scaffolds, the barking of overseers. Justinian's vision of Rome doesn't just sit in dusty ruins, it soars. Domes curve like the heavens, mosaics gleam like starlight. There's nothing humble about this new Rome, and yet for all its beauty, this city is ruled not just by emperors, but by whispers. Bureaucrats here are professionals in ways that would make ancient Roman senators blink. These aren't toga-wearing aristocrats debating Cicero. These are silk-robed record keepers who can quote 13 tax clauses from memory and blacklist your entire family if you sneeze the wrong way. The streets hum with intrigue. Monks argue politics, athletes lead riots, and eunuchs outmaneuver generals in the halls of power. This is Rome on espresso, faster, smarter, and sometimes more absurd. Historians still argue whether Constantinople was the true heir of Rome, or a completely different beast that just kept the brand. But here in the streets of the capital, you feel it. The stones might be Greek, but the bones beneath are Roman. The language has shifted. Greek is now dominant, but Latin still lingers like an aging aunt who won't leave the banquet. Official edicts are still published in Latin. Coins still bear Latin titles. Justinian himself speaks both fluently as if toggling between identities. Quirky note court officials were ranked by robe color. The wrong shade of purple could get you stabbed or promoted depending on the mood of the emperor. Justinian is a man of contradictions. He builds law codes with one hand and raises cities with the other. His wife Theodora, a former actress, scandalous turned empress, is sharper than most senators and not shy about telling people what's what. The empire is rich but stretched. Its neighbors are restless. Persians in the east glare across borders. Germanic tribes swirl across Italy and Spain. And to the south, something new is stirring in the deserts of Arabia, but that's a storm still beyond the horizon. You take a moment on a marble bench overlooking the hippodrome, where chariot races used to whip crowds into political frenzies. Blues and greens. Those weren't just team colors, they were factions. Political, religious, and occasionally homicidal. Once they rioted so hard Justinian almost fled the city. Almost. Instead, Theodora gave him that look and he stayed. Then he burned half the city down and rebuilt it prettier. Power here doesn't whisper. It struts in golden shoes. And yet as mighty as Constantinople is, Justinian's eyes are always elsewhere westward. Italy, North Africa, Spain, the lands of the old empire. He sends his armies like Belisarius, who you met earlier, marching with banners that claim to restore the empire. The West may have fallen, but in Justinian's mind it's simply on pause. You wander the great palace overhearing Latin clerks argue over Gothic land deeds. One mutters about Rome as if it's a distant cousin who married poorly and drinks too much. But here's a fun little twist. While Justinian fights to recover the old territories, his lawyers are rewriting Roman law from the ground up. The Corpus Juris Civilis, a tidy and terrifyingly vast consolidation of centuries of legal rulings, imperial edicts, and judgy footnotes. It will go on to shape European law for centuries, even though nobody at the time really thanks him for it. Back on the streets, a street vendor hawks silver charms shaped like eagles and old Roman helmets. Tourists, yes, there were tourists, snap them up while munching honeyed pastries. A drunken scholar recites Virgil from memory while being chased by a cat. Somewhere nearby, a scribe copies old Roman texts correcting the grammar because he's a pedant, and Rome must be precise even in decline. There's something surreal about this version of Rome. It's more lavish, more complex, and somehow more Roman in its desire to keep up appearances. You slip into a small chapel lit with oil lamps. The ceiling glitters with gold, and the saints all stare down with haunting serenity. There's no Jupiter here, no Mars, but the architecture still remembers them. Round arches, domes, columns, the bones of Rome have simply dressed for a new era. And yet you sense it beneath all the ceremony, the structure is under stress. Borders are cracking. Plague has already swept through the empire, decimating the population. The economy wobbles like a badly poured amphora of wine, and the reconquest of the West is bleeding gold and soldiers faster than even Justinian can replace them. But for now, Constantinople still believes it is Rome. You return to your room. Stone walls, a wooden cot, and a flickering oil lamp. Outside the city hums like a sleeping lion. Somewhere in the distance, bells ring for vespers. Rome didn't fall. It transformed. And here it glitters. Not with the fire of legions, but with gold mosaics, law codes, and emperors who refuse to admit the story is over. You close your eyes beneath the dome of a city that thinks it's eternal. And in some ways, maybe it is. You wake to the rustle of papyrus scrolls and the far-off clang of hammers. The morning light seeps through silk curtains, revealing a city of contradictions, half Roman monument, half construction site. You're still in Constantinople, but the atmosphere has changed. There's a restlessness in the air. Justinian is about to go all in on his most ambitious, some would say reckless plan, putting the old Roman Empire back together. And like every ambitious plan in history, this one begins with a war. Justinian doesn't start with Italy. No, he sends his best general Belisarius to North Africa first. You might think, why North Africa? Well, it used to be a jewel of the Western Empire, rich Romanized and covered in grain fields that fed half of Italy. But now it's ruled by the Vandals. Yes, the Vandals. The guys whose name would go on to mean people who break stuff, even though, fun fact, they were surprisingly polite conquerors. They maintained Roman baths, spoke Latin, and had a weird fondness for Roman architecture when they weren't occasionally looting Rome, of course. Still, Justinian wants them gone, so he sends Belisarius with a modest army, maybe 15,000 men and some ships, and somehow against all odds they win. Swiftly, cleanly. North Africa is back under Roman control before most people even know a war started. You walk through Carthage newly liberated, and it's almost eerie how Roman everything still looks. Streets in neat grids, temples turned churches, coins with Latin inscriptions. A local noble offers you wine in a villa with frescoes of Hercules. If it weren't for the occasional Gothic soldier eyeing you suspiciously, you'd swear it was 400 CE. But Justinian's just getting started. Next on his list, Italy. Now you remember Theodoric's kingdom. That surprisingly functional Gothic-Roman fusion. Well, by the time Justinian's ready to invade, it's falling apart. Theodoric's successors are arguing, and the whole setup is wobbling like a Baroque desk with one leg too short. Perfect timing for an invasion. So Justinian sends Belisarius again because if you have a hero with perfect cheekbones and military genius, why not? The war that follows the Gothic War is long, brutal, and makes modern historians wince. It lasts nearly 20 years. Think of it as the empire trying to glue a broken vase together by throwing it at the floor again. Belisarius takes Sicily with barely a sword drawn. Italy, though, is harder. He fights Gothic kings with names like Widiges and Totila, who keep losing battles but somehow stay in the game. Belisarius captures Rome. then loses it, then takes it again, like a drunk couple fighting over who gets the espresso machine. Rome, poor thing, suffers deeply. Its population drops to a few tens of thousands. Its aqueducts are cut. The Senate is dissolved. For centuries, people will call this the moment when Rome died again. That makes 2 deaths for those keeping count. Quirky tidbit: during one siege, the defenders of Rome reportedly catapulted statues at the besieging Goths because they ran out of rocks. That's how desperate things got using fine art as artillery. You step through the ruins of the Forum boots, squelching in puddles. Statues lie face down. Fountains have dried. The basilicas echo with the groans of the wounded and the whispers of priests. The air smells of smoke, mold, and very old despair. And yet here's the twist: even amid all this ruin, both sides insist they are fighting for Rome. The Goths claim to be its true protectors. They point to their decades of peaceful rule, their respect for Roman customs, their desire for stability. The Byzantines or Eastern Romans claim the opposite. "We're the original," they shout. "You're just squatters with bad Latin and questionable religious views." Historians still argue whether Justinian's reconquest saved or doomed Italy. Some say he restored Roman dignity. Others say he turned a salvageable post-imperial West into a smoking wasteland. And the war doesn't end quickly. Even after Belisarius is recalled more than once, Justinian sends another general, Narses, who finishes the job with terrifying efficiency. By 554, Italy is technically reunited with the empire. Hooray! But by then, most of it has been wrecked beyond recognition. The Gothic elite gone. Roman senatorial class nearly extinct. The cities depopulated, the infrastructure ruined. And who comes next? The Lombards. A fresh batch of Germanic invaders ready to fill the power vacuum like enthusiastic raccoons in a broken pantry. You sit on a broken column outside Ravenna, rubbing dust from your sleeves. You hear the distant call of a Lombard war horn. A merchant mutters about taxes increasing again. A bishop passes by clutching a relic and looking exasperated. Rome has returned, sort of. But at what cost? The land is Roman again, but the people are exhausted. The government in Constantinople keeps trying to send tax collectors, judges, and soldiers, but the infrastructure isn't there. Roads are wrecked, bridges are gone. Even the old Roman post system, once the envy of the world, is now a rumor wrapped in nostalgia. You pass a child carving names into a stone wall. He doesn't know Latin. His father was born during the war. His grandmother remembers Rome just barely. The empire may be whole again, but in truth it's stitched together with pain and forgetting. Still, you can't deny the ambition. Justinian's dream was enormous, and for a moment, against all logic, he did it. The empire stretched from Spain to Syria again. But it was brittle, shiny but cracked. You retreat into a monastery for the night. The monks sing in Latin. The scriptoria still copy Roman texts. The walls are thick, the lamps gentle. For a moment it feels like the old world survives in quiet corners, and so the Roman Empire, shattered, reassembled, and exhausted, limps on. Glorious, fragile, refusing to die. Rain taps softly against your window as you settle into your cot in Constantinople. The year is 541 CE, and the city wears its grandeur like a faded gown, still magnificent, but with stains and tears that no amount of embroidery can hide. You can almost feel the unease in the air. Whispers of death travel faster than the imperial couriers. The plague of Justinian has arrived. Yes, plague. Not the kind you can wash off with some olive oil and crocodile dung, remember that sunscreen trick. But a grim, invisible visitor that swoops down on the city with relentless cruelty. It's one of the first recorded pandemics in human history, and it spreads like wildfire along the empire's bustling trade routes. Ships from Egypt bring it to the harbor. Rats infest granaries. Fleas hitch rides on unsuspecting merchants. The plague doesn't discriminate. Emperors, peasants, priests, they all fall. The death toll is staggering. Some estimates say the population of Constantinople shrinks by a third or more. The empire's tax base crumbles, armies shrink, and the economy staggers under the weight of empty streets and shuttered markets. You walk the emptied marketplaces where fruit rots on carts and dogs scavenge for scraps. The scent of incense and death mingles oddly with the salty sea air. Funerals happen every hour. Graves grow like wildflowers. Quirky details: some citizens believe the plague was caused by bad air trapped in the city's sewers, leading to frantic, ineffective sewer cleaning campaigns. Others thought it was divine punishment for wearing purple shoes, yes, the very shoes the emperor favored. Justinian himself falls ill but recovers. Some say his survival gave hope. Others say it delayed necessary reforms by keeping a sick ruler stubbornly on the throne. Historians still argue whether the plague was the turning point that sealed the empire's slow decline, or just a tragic bump in an already rocky road. Meanwhile, nature seems to conspire against the empire in other ways. Earthquakes shake cities, floods wash away crops, fires consume wooden neighborhoods. The empire's vast bureaucracy struggles to respond, tied up in red tape and court intrigues. Yet life continues. Markets reopen. Schools teach Greek and Latin, monks copy manuscripts by candlelight, and priests preach salvation. The empire's heartbeat, though faint, keeps pulsing. You visit a bathhouse, its pools cold and cracked, but still a social hub. Inside, men debate the latest philosophy, unaware their world is changing faster than their arguments. Outside, children play among the ruins of statues toppled in previous wars. A cat chases a rat across a broken mosaic. Somewhere a bard sings of Rome's glory, days half forgotten but never quite lost. The plague and disasters have revealed the empire's fragility, but also its stubborn resilience. You lie back on a stone bench listening to the distant tolling of bells and wonder how much longer this ancient beast can endure. The Roman Empire, after all, has always been a story of survival through adaptation, sometimes painful, sometimes tragic. And tonight, as the rain slows to a whisper, you feel that pulse faint, but steady beneath the cracked stones. You step into Rome as the sun dips low, casting long, golden shadows over streets that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires. But this Rome is no longer the heartbeat of a vast empire. Instead, it's a city caught between ghosts, ancient stone skeletons of the past, and the flickering flame of a new, uncertain future. The air is thick with the mingled scents of burning wood from hearth fires, aromatic incense wafting from churches, and the faint but persistent musk of decay. You breathe it in and realize this city is both alive and dying at once. The grandeur is still there, etched into the broken columns, the scattered marble fragments, and the arches that dare to hold back the passage of time. Here in the 7th century, Rome is a patchwork of competing powers. The once mighty emperor, the symbol of Roman unity and authority, is nowhere to be seen. His throne sits empty figuratively and literally, while the city is ruled by a messy council of bishops, dukes, and local nobles, who each claim a piece of the fractured puzzle. At the center of it all is the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. Not just a religious figurehead anymore, but a political force, a king without a crown, a spiritual leader who holds sway over the hearts and minds of the people in a way that armies no longer can. You watch as Pope Gregory IV, later known as Gregory the Great, moves through the city's winding streets. His robes are simple, but his presence commands respect. This man doesn't wield a sword or raise a legion. Instead, his power lies in sermons, diplomacy, and the subtle art of persuasion. He's one of the few who can negotiate peace between warring factions, calm restless mobs and offer hope when the city's faith falters. The politics of Rome are tangled like the ivy climbing its ancient walls. The Lombards press at the city's edges, threatening to swallow what remains. Byzantine officials representative to the Eastern Roman Empire that still clings to life in Constantinople attempt to assert control, but their authority is tenuous at best. Local dukes, sometimes little more than warlords, carve out their own territories within the city, each loyal to no one but their own ambitions. Amid this chaos, the papacy steadily grows in influence. It becomes a beacon of stability, an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The Pope's authority spreads beyond spiritual matters, reaching into governance, justice, and even military defense. You stroll past the ruins of the once mighty Colosseum, its grand arches and broken walls now serving as a quarry for building materials. Stone from the arena's fallen columns has been hauled off to reinforce churches, palaces, and fortifications. It's ironic the symbol of brutal gladiatorial combat is being repurposed into sanctuaries of prayer. Children play among the rubble, their laughter echoing through the open space where emperors once watched bloody spectacles. They kick tattered leather balls and chase each other, unaware they're surrounded by centuries of history soaked in sweat and blood. In the marketplace, merchants from across the Mediterranean gather to trade spices, fabrics, and pottery. The stalls overflow with vibrant colors and scents, a reminder that despite political chaos, commerce endures. Traders speak in a patchwork of languages, Latin, mixed with Greek, Arabic whispers, and Germanic accents. This is a Rome that has become a crossroads, a melting pot, where old traditions meet new influences. A local craftsman catches your eye. He's carving intricate Christian symbols into a fragment of marble salvaged from a ruined temple. His hands are steady, his focus intense. Rome isn't dead, he tells you, his voice steady and sure. It's just changing its face. The gods we once worshipped have gone, but something else has taken their place. You nod, feeling the weight of his words. The city wears many faces, some cracked and weathered, others shining with fresh paint and gold leaf, and some hidden beneath layers of history like a secret waiting to be uncovered. The Christian church has become Rome's new identity. Basilicas rise where pagan temples once stood, their frescoed walls telling stories of saints instead of emperors. Monks labor in scriptoriums, painstakingly copying ancient texts by candlelight, preserving fragments of the old world even as they build a new one. Yet the tension between past and present is palpable. You overhear a heated debate between two priests in a shadowed alley. One clings to the old Latin liturgy, the other advocates for Greek hymns creeping in from the east. Their voices rise, blending theological fervor with cultural pride. Religion here's no longer just about faith, it's politics, identity, and survival. The city's population is a patchwork too. Old Roman families, proud but diminished, still hold some influence. But new blood flows in barbarians who've settled, merchants from distant lands, clergy devoted to shaping Rome's destiny. You pass a street performer juggling coins and telling tales of Romulus and Remus. The crowd listens, entranced by stories that feel more myth than history. Rome, after all, is a city of stories, some real, some invented, all meaningful. At dusk, the city's lamps flicker on, casting warm pools of light on cobblestones, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. In the distance, the bells of a church toll, calling the faithful to evening prayer. You find yourself in a small chapel, its walls painted with saints who gaze down with serene eyes. The air is thick with incense and whispered prayers. It's a sanctuary amid the ruins, a place where hope and memory intertwine. As night deepens, the city's restless energy slows. Windows shudder. Fires burn low. The ghosts of emperors, senators, and common folk alike seem to settle into the stones, watching over a Rome that refuses to fade quietly. You lie back on a bench looking up at the fragmented sky framed by broken arches. Somewhere a nightingale sings. Somewhere else a monk murmurs a prayer for peace. Rome may have lost its empire, its armies, and its glory, but its spirit endures in faith and culture, in the stubborn hearts of those who call it home. And somewhere in the quiet, the ghost of the empire smiles, knowing this story is far from over. You stand on a hill overlooking a sprawling kingdom of forest, rivers, and farms, stretching across what's now northern Italy, southern Germany, and parts of France. The year is 800 CE, and the air buzzes with the clang of blacksmiths, the neighing of horses, and the distant chants from a cathedral under construction. Here rides Charlemagne, the man who wants to be emperor, the Roman emperor no less, even though he's a Frank, a barbarian to some and definitely not from Rome. Charlemagne's empire is an odd beast. It stretches across vast lands, holding together people who speak wildly different languages, worship slightly different versions of Christianity, and squabble over every grain of power. Yet his vision is clear: to revive the glory of Rome, to unite Christendom under one rule, and to claim a legacy that will echo through the ages. The day you meet Charlemagne is chilly and gray. He wears armor polished enough to see your reflection, and a crown that's equal parts Christian symbolism and imperial bravado. His beard is thick, his eyes sharp, and he radiates a confidence that borders on arrogance. Yet beneath that bravado lies a man keenly aware of the challenges ahead. Rome, as the world once knew it, is long gone. But the idea of Rome, the idea of empire, is something he clings to fiercely. You follow his procession into Aachen, his new capital. The city is a mix of Roman ruins and Frankish timber houses, a symbol of past and future blending uneasily. The Palatine Chapel, inspired by Roman basilicas and Byzantine designs, rises as a testament to Charlemagne's ambitions, a religious and political center meant to rival Constantinople. Here Charlemagne surrounds himself with scholars, poets, and clerics. He encourages the Carolingian Renaissance, a revival of learning and arts aimed at rekindling the intellectual fire of Rome. Monks copy ancient manuscripts, scribes refine Latin grammar, and the court buzzes with debates on theology, law, and governance. Yet Charlemagne's empire is more than culture and ceremony. It's a military machine built on the loyalty of counts and dukes who swear fealty to him. It's a patchwork of local customs, feudal obligations, and nascent bureaucracies, trying desperately to imitate the complex governance of the old empire. Historians still argue whether Charlemagne was truly a Roman emperor or simply a powerful Frankish king, using Rome's legacy for legitimacy. Some say he revived the empire. Others say he created something new, a medieval fusion of tribal and imperial. On Christmas Day in the year 800, the moment comes. As Charlemagne kneels in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Pope Leo III crowns him Emperor of the Romans. The crowd gasps. Charlemagne looks surprised. The Pope looks triumphant. And the world shifts beneath their feet. This crowning isn't just ceremonial. It's a bold political statement. It challenges the authority of Constantinople and claims a Western Roman legacy. But it's also controversial. Charlemagne didn't ask for the crown, and some believe it undermined the Pope's own power. You stand in the crowd feeling the weight of the moment. The Holy Roman Empire is born, though it won't be called that for a few centuries. It's a kingdom built on faith power and a whole lot of political maneuvering. Life in Charlemagne's empire is a mix of grandeur and hardship. Cities are small by Roman standards. Most people live in villages farming the land with wooden plows. Roads are rudimentary, often muddy and dangerous. Still, there's a growing sense of order law and Christian unity. Quirky tidbit Charlemagne reportedly bathed only once a year, believing it kept him healthy, a habit that earned him both admiration for his ruggedness and a fair bit of teasing. You visit a monastic school where young nobles learn Latin theology and the art of governance. It's the closest thing to a university around, and the monks preach that learning is a sacred duty to preserve civilization. Meanwhile, outside the palace walls, peasants toil, soldiers patrol, and traders move goods along dusty roads. The empire breathes unevenly, sometimes vibrant, sometimes struggling under the weight of its ambitions. Despite his power, Charlemagne struggles with communication. His empire spans multiple languages and cultures, and governance is often delegated to local leaders with varying degrees of loyalty. He issues capitularies, royal decrees to unify laws, encourage church reforms, and regulate daily life. These documents attempt to knit a diverse realm into a semblance of unity. Religious fervor is intense. The empire is Christian but also suspicious of pagan remnants. Missionaries push north and east, converting and sometimes brutally subduing local tribes. You witness a council where bishops argue over how to enforce church discipline. The debates are heated, blending theology with politics in a way that would make even Augustine blush. The empire faces external threats too. Vikings raid from the north, Magyar horsemen press from the east, and Muslims hold Sicily and parts of Spain. Charlemagne's successors will grapple with these dangers long after his death. Yet for a moment the empire seems unstoppable, a shining beacon of order in a chaotic world. You walk the palace halls, hearing echoes of Latin prayers, Frankish songs, and the scribbles of clerics copying texts. The air is thick with ambition, faith, and the scent of candle wax. Charlemagne dies in 814, a ruler who tried to bridge the ancient and medieval worlds, who claimed a Roman legacy, but created something uniquely his own. His empire will fracture, his heirs will bicker, and the title of Roman emperor will be contested for centuries. But the idea remains. Rome, reborn in Frankish armor, stubbornly refuses to fade away. And as you leave Aachen, watching the sun set over a land both ancient and new, you realize you've witnessed one of history's great reinventions, the medieval remix of an empire that shaped the West for a millennium to come. You find yourself standing on the rugged hills of the Iberian Peninsula, the land of sun-baked olive groves and ancient Roman roads. But it's no longer Rome's heartland. This is the kingdom of the Visigoths, a people once considered barbarians by Rome, now rulers of a realm that tries hard to hold on to Roman traditions while forging their own identity. It's the early 7th century, and the Visigothic kingdom spans much of what we now call Spain and Portugal. Its capital, Toledo, buzzes with activity. Merchants haggle in markets, nobles gather in council halls, and clergy debate theology in stone chapels. Though their language is Gothic, their laws, customs, and even architecture remain deeply Roman. You wander through a bustling plaza where Latin inscriptions adorn public buildings. The Visigothic kings proudly claim the mantle of Rome, styling themselves as heirs to the empire's legacy, even as they govern with distinctly Germanic flair. Their courts issue legal codes rooted in Roman law but sprinkled with tribal customs and the evolving influence of Christianity. The Liber Judiciorum, the Visigothic code, is a masterpiece of legal blending. It merges Roman legal principles with Gothic customs, aiming to unify a diverse population of Romans, Goths, and other peoples under a single set of rules. The code covers everything from property disputes to marriage laws and even hunting rights. It's a legal attempt to hold together a fracturing world. Quirky detail: despite their barbarian reputation, Visigothic kings sponsored the building of ornate churches, and their art features intricate jewelry, mosaics, and illuminated manuscripts, often decorated with motifs borrowed from Roman pagan symbols reinterpreted in Christian contexts. Religious tensions simmer beneath the surface. The Visigoths were originally Arian Christians, a branch of Christianity considered heretical by the Roman Catholic Church. The majority Roman population, however, adhered to Nicene Christianity. This religious divide creates friction and political intrigue. Eventually, under King Record, the Visigoths convert officially to Catholicism. In 587, a unifying but complex act that reshapes the kingdom's spiritual and political landscape. You sit in a council chamber as nobles debate the authority of the king versus local counts. Power is fragile, negotiated constantly between central authority and regional lords. Visigothic kings wield influence but often rely on alliances, marriages, and oaths to maintain control. Despite their efforts to preserve Roman culture, the Visigoths face external pressures. Muslim forces from North Africa begin their inexorable push into the peninsula, setting the stage for a centuries-long clash that will reshape the region. The city of Toledo buzzes with rumors of invaders' alliances being forged and betrayals whispered in shadowed corridors. The tension is palpable. You visit the city's cathedral where Roman columns are repurposed into Christian sanctuaries. The stonework blends Visigothic and Roman styles, a testament to the kingdom's dual heritage. Frescoes depict biblical scenes alongside stylized figures wearing Roman togas awkwardly adjusted for the new faith. The kingdom's fall is sudden and shocking. In 711, the Muslim Umayyad forces defeat the Visigothic army at the Battle of Guadalete. King Roderick falls in battle and the kingdom collapses swiftly. Yet even in defeat, the Visigothic legacy endures. Their legal codes influence the emerging Christian kingdoms in the north, and their blending of Roman and Germanic traditions leaves an imprint on Spanish culture and law that lasts for centuries. Historians still debate how Roman the Visigoths truly were. Some see them as inheritors who preserved Roman civilization in the West. Others view them as conquerors who imposed new power structures atop a decaying empire. Walking through the remnants of Visigothic palaces and churches, you feel the tension between continuity and change. Rome is gone, but its ghost haunts every stone, every law, every prayer whispered beneath vaulted ceilings. As dusk falls, you watch the city lights flicker on, mirroring the stars emerging overhead. The kingdom of the Visigoths may have vanished, but its echoes ripple through time, proof that Rome's story is not just about its fall, but about the worlds it shaped, long after the legions marched away. You stand at the edge of the Mediterranean, watching the sun dip behind hills that have seen countless armies and empires rise and fall. The year is the early 7th century, and the Eastern Roman Empire, known to some as Byzantium, finds itself locked in a deadly struggle with a new and formidable adversary, the Islamic Caliphates. This confrontation isn't just about territory. It's a collision of worlds, faiths, and ideas that will shape history for centuries. Constantinople remains a dazzling jewel, its walls thick and proud, its citizens devoted and vigilant. But the empire is stretched thin. Plagues, internal strife, and previous wars have sapped its strength. Yet it still carries the banner of Rome, ruling from the Bosporus with an iron fist wrapped in silk. From the deserts of Arabia, a new force surges. The Islamic Caliphates, born from the teachings of Muhammad and propelled by fervent faith, zeal, and military prowess, sweep across the Middle East and North Africa with breathtaking speed. The Umayyad Caliphate pushes into Byzantine territories, challenging the empire's hold on lands that have been Roman for centuries. You follow the movements of armies on the map, a chess game played with spears, swords, and cunning generals. Battles rage across deserts, mountains, and cities. The Byzantines wield Greek fire, a terrifying secret weapon that burns even on water, While the caliphates utilize swift cavalry and tactical innovation, the clash isn't merely military, it's cultural and religious. Byzantium holds the legacy of Orthodox Christianity, imperial bureaucracy, and Greco-Roman law. The caliphates bring a new religious vision, a unifying sense of purpose and administrative reforms that rapidly organize vast territories. You imagine the sieges Constantinople itself faces assaults in 674, 678, and again in 717, 718. And though it withstands the empire, loses Syria, Egypt, and North Africa, crucial breadbaskets and cultural centers. Within the city walls, life goes on. Markets bustle with merchants selling silk and spices, monks copy texts, and scholars debate philosophy and theology. But outside, the loss of provinces hits hard. Tax revenues shrink and the empire's reach contracts. Historians still argue how much the Islamic conquest permanently altered the Byzantine Empire. Some see it as the moment Byzantium became something new, not just Roman, but distinctly Eastern Greek Orthodox and fiercely resilient. You walk the streets of Constantinople imagining a scribe copying a letter, reporting the loss of Alexandria, a city that had been a Roman cultural hub for centuries. The scribe shakes his head, unsure whether to despair or hope for divine mercy. Despite the territorial losses the empire reforms, it develops the theme system military provinces governed by generals who combine civilian and military power to better defend and administer shrinking borders. You overhear heated debates in the imperial court. Some argue for diplomacy, others for total war. Religious leaders call for spiritual renewal. The emperor wears his purple robes tightly aware that each decision could tip the fragile balance. On the frontiers, soldiers prepare for raids. Farmers watch the horizon warily. The empire is no longer the vast expanse it once was, but remains a beacon of culture, law, and faith. Quirky detail Byzantine generals often commissioned lavish icons and religious mosaics as prayers for victory, believing that divine favor was as crucial as military strength. Meanwhile, the caliphates flourish. Cities like Damascus and Baghdad become centers of learning, science, and culture, rivaling Constantinople itself. You reflect on the vast tapestry of this era, the wars, the religious fervor, the human cost. The old Roman Empire may have shrunk, but its influence spreads in unexpected ways. Byzantium endures a Roman heart beating in a changed body while the Islamic world rises, reshaping the map and history. As night falls, you look out over the city lights, knowing that this ancient contest will echo for centuries. A testament to the resilience of empires and the enduring power of ideas. You find yourself on a wooden longship creaking beneath the weight of oarsmen and warriors. The salty breeze bites your face as you sail down a twisting river toward a place called Rome, though your mind quickly learns that to the Norse Rome is as much a legend as a destination, a distant land of riches, gods, and stories. It's the early Middle Ages and the Vikings are on the move, curious, hungry, and often violent, exploring the edges of the old Roman world. The Vikings or Norsemen come from lands far north, cold forests and fjords where winter lasts half the year and the sun barely sets in summer. They are skilled sailors, fierce fighters, and relentless explorers. To them, Rome is not just a city, but an idea, wealth, power, and civilization wrapped in stone and mystery. As your ship approaches the riverbanks, you see wooden huts, clustered under tall trees, people milling about in clothes of wool and leather. The locals speak a language you don't understand. Their gods are different, their customs strange. To them, you are a foreign force, either a traitor, a raider, or something in between. The Vikings first come as raiders. Their longships slip silently through the fog, landing on beaches or riverbanks before dawn. They strike quickly, taking what they want, gold, silver, livestock, and sometimes people. They leave behind fear and chaos, but also tales of a terrifying new threat that even the descendants of Rome must reckon with. Quirky tidbit Vikings didn't wear horned helmets, that's a myth cooked up centuries later, but they did have a fondness for intricate jewelry and tattoos marking status and stories on their bodies. Historians still argue about the Vikings' impact. Were they simply destructive barbarians, or did their travels facilitate trade, cultural exchange, and even political change across Europe? You spend time in a Viking camp watching warriors sharpen their axes and traders haggle over furs and beads. You learn that Vikings are not just raiders, but also settlers, craftsmen, and explorers who established trade routes from the Baltic to the Black Sea. They navigate rivers built by Romans centuries earlier, roads of water that connect distant lands. Their journeys bring them into contact with Byzantium, the Islamic caliphates, and various European kingdoms. Viking eyes see Rome through a prism of legend and reality. Constantinople, known as Miklagard, the Great City, is a coveted prize. Vikings travel there as mercenaries, traders, and sometimes envoys, fascinated by its wealth and complexity. You imagine a Viking merchant in Constantinople's bustling markets, trading furs for silk and spices, learning words in Greek and Latin, and marveling at mosaics depicting emperors and saints. Their presence is felt far and wide. They settle in parts of England, Ireland, and even Russia, influencing local politics and culture. Yet their relationship with Rome's legacy is complex. They don't worship Roman gods, they don't speak Latin, but they absorb what they need: laws, trade practices, military tactics, and adapt them to their own world. You hear tales of Viking chieftains who adopt Christianity, marry local nobles, and claim descent from Roman soldiers. The lines between conqueror and subject blur. In the forests of Scandinavia, runes are carved with stories of distant lands, battles won, and gods invoked. The Vikings' sagas become part of the oral tradition that preserves memory long before ink and parchment. You watch a fire dance as skalds, poets, and storytellers recite epic tales. These stories echo with themes of honor, fate, and the clash of worlds, echoes of Rome and beyond. Despite their fearsome reputation, Vikings also contribute to the medieval world's growth. Their ships open trade routes. Their settlements create new political entities. Their interactions with Rome's remnants spark change. You imagine a Viking warrior pondering the mosaics of Ravenna or the grandeur of Constantinople, realizing that beneath the ruins and splendor lies a story older and more powerful than any single kingdom. As your ship drifts away from the river's mouth, you look back at the lands once ruled by Rome. They are a patchwork of cultures, kingdoms, and faiths, forever shaped by those who built, conquered, and remembered. The Vikings have entered the stage not just as barbarians, but as inheritors of a complicated legacy. Rome may have been a city and an empire, but its spirit sails on many ships through many eyes. And you know this story is far from over. You find yourself in a vast hall somewhere in Central Europe, the air thick with the smell of wood smoke, wax candles, and the distant echo of chanting. The year is 962 CE, and a man named Otto stands before the assembled nobles and clergy, his crown gleaming in the flickering light. This moment is pivotal. Otto has just been crowned emperor by the Pope, reviving the title of Roman Emperor in the West, but in a form as confusing as it is ambitious: the Holy Roman Empire. You might think the name Holy Roman Empire means something straightforward. But here's the kicker. It wasn't holy in the way you imagined. It wasn't fully Roman, and it was far from a unified empire in the classical sense. It was instead a patchwork of duchies, counties, bishoprics, and principalities, held together more by ceremony and religion than by centralized power. Otto's empire is an awkward but fascinating attempt to claim the mantle of the old Roman world while adapting to the fragmented reality of medieval Europe. The title is a political tool, a symbol of divine sanction and a claim to authority over the Germanic peoples, Italy, and beyond. You watch as the emperor makes promises to the church protection, reform, and partnership. The Pope in turn bestows the crown, signifying a fusion of spiritual and temporal power that will shape European politics for centuries. Yet despite this grand ceremony, Otto's control is limited. His realm is a complex mosaic of semi-independent territories, each with its own customs, laws, and ambitions. The emperor relies heavily on alliances, marriages, and the influence of bishops who rule lands like princes. Historians still argue about how empire-like the Holy Roman Empire truly was. Some call it a patchwork kingdom. Others see it as a spiritual successor to Rome, with an evolving identity rooted in Christian monarchy and feudal governance. You wander the imperial court where Latin is the language of diplomacy, but German and Italian dialects buzz in side conversations. Knights in chainmail argue over land disputes while clerics debate theological points. The tension between central authority and local power is palpable. Outside the court towns are growing. Markets bustle, craftsmen ply their trades, and universities begin to emerge, fostering learning and debate. The legacy of Rome's legal traditions lives on in the empire's laws, while Christian morality underpins its governance. Yet challenges abound. The emperor must navigate rival nobles, the ambitions of the papacy, and external threats from Vikings, Magyars, and later the Ottomans. Quirky detail: the empire's complex electoral system means that the emperor is chosen by a small group of prince-electors, a political game that can be as cutthroat as any battlefield. The Holy Roman Empire is less a cohesive state and more a living tapestry, weaving together threads of ancient Rome, Germanic tradition, and medieval Christianity. As you stroll through cathedrals adorned with Romanesque arches and frescoes, you feel the weight of history pressing in. The empire is a bridge linking a lost Roman past with a medieval future. And in this hall crowned by God and heralded by men, the ghost of Rome takes on new life, imperfect, sprawling, and endlessly complicated. You leave the hall as evening falls, knowing that the Holy Roman Empire will persist for centuries, sometimes mighty, sometimes fractured, but always claiming the legacy of Rome. The empire may not be what Julius Caesar imagined, but it is what Europe becomes. And so the story continues. You walk through the narrow, bustling streets of Constantinople, the city's walls towering above you like ancient sentinels. The year is the 10th century, and though the empire has shrunk since Justinian's ambitious days, its spirit burns bright. Byzantium, this Eastern Roman Empire, is the last great heir to Rome's legacy, a dazzling fusion of Roman law, Greek culture, Christian faith, and imperial ceremony. The city dazzles. Golden mosaics catch the light in the Hagia Sophia, depicting emperors and saints with a richness that seems almost otherworldly. The air buzzes with traders from all corners of the world, Venetians, Arabs, Slavs, and more, each bringing good stories and intrigue. Yet beneath the glitter, Constantinople is a city of contradictions. The emperors sit on thrones of gold, commanding armies and courts, but their realm is smaller and more vulnerable than ever. Barbarian tribes roam the borders. The rise of Islamic powers has shifted trade routes and power balances. Internal politics are as treacherous as any battlefield. You enter the great palace where the emperor's courtiers bustle about in robes embroidered with peacocks and eagles. Ceremonies here are elaborate performances of power. Every gesture is choreographed to remind the world and the emperor himself that Byzantium is the true Rome. Historians still argue how much Byzantium truly resembles ancient Rome. Some see it as a direct continuation, others as a new empire shaped by Greek culture and Christian theology. You witness a council where scholars debate the latest theological controversies, their voices rising and falling like a symphony. The emperor listens, weighing their words carefully. Religious unity is crucial. It holds the empire together even as armies falter. The empire's military is a complex machine combining heavy infantry cavalry and the secret weapon Greek fire. This incendiary liquid can set enemy ships ablaze, a terrifying edge in naval battles. You imagine the chaos as flames lick across the water, smoke choking the air. Trade is vital. Constantinople sits at the crossroads of continents, controlling the flow of spices, silk, and precious metals. Its markets overflow with riches from east and west, fueling an economy that supports grand building projects, armies, and a sophisticated bureaucracy. Quirky detail: Byzantine officials used a highly intricate system of court titles and ranks, some with names so long and complex that historians still struggle to pronounce them correctly. Yet the empire's bureaucracy is both a strength and a weakness. It maintains order but can be slow and resistant to change. Corruption festers in the shadows, and palace intrigue often spills into open conflict. You stroll along the city walls looking out over the Sea of Marmara. Ships from Venice and Genoa dock, their crews eager to trade or plot. These Italian city-states will play a pivotal role in Byzantium's fate in the centuries to come. In the city's churches and monasteries, monks labor over manuscripts, preserving classical texts and copying religious works. This cultural preservation will prove invaluable to future generations. As twilight descends, you hear the call to prayer echo faintly from distant minarets, a reminder of the shifting religious and political landscape beyond the city's borders. Despite challenges, Constantinople remains a beacon of art culture and resilience, a golden mask that hides both decline and defiance. You rest beneath a vaulted ceiling adorned with stars, feeling the weight of centuries in the stones around you. The empire is smaller, yes, but its identity, its claim to Roman legacy, is as alive as ever. And in this city of mosaics and mystery, the spirit of Rome endures, shimmering like the light on gilded glass. You find yourself in the spring of 1204, standing in the shadowed alleys of Constantinople, a city cloaked in opulence yet bracing for calamity. The Byzantine Empire, that long lingering echo of Rome, is about to face a blow so profound it will ripple through history, a catastrophe not from foreign enemies, but from those who call themselves fellow Christians. The Fourth Crusade, initially conceived as a holy mission to reclaim Jerusalem, has veered off course, culminating in the infamous sack of Constantinople, an event that would shatter the city and the empire forever. The atmosphere is thick with tension and confusion. Crusader knight soldiers clad in shining armor emblazoned with crosses mingle uneasily with Byzantine nobility, diplomats, and the common folk. The city, with its massive walls, gilded domes, and bustling markets, still gleams with centuries of grandeur. But its foundations tremble beneath the weight of political intrigue, debt, and divided loyalties. You wander through the labyrinthine streets as rumors swirl. The Crusaders were diverted from their mission, entangled in Venetian politics and debts, compelled to attack the very city they once vowed to protect. Byzantine factions, desperate and fractured, have offered bribes and promises, sowing distrust and fueling chaos. The initial assault begins not with siege engines, but with deception. Gates are opened under false pretenses. Alliances shift like quicksand. The defenders fight bravely, but the invaders breach the walls and flood into the city, unleashed fury turning sacred spaces into battlegrounds. Quirky detail: during the sack, the Crusaders looted treasures so vast that Venetian merchants reportedly sailed away with riches worth a fortune, gold, silver icons, and relics, some later displayed in Venice's grand churches, a lasting testament to this dark episode. Historians still argue about the motives behind the sack. Was it a tragic miscalculation, a calculated Venetian ploy, or a betrayal fueled by greed and desperation? Whatever the case, the consequences were devastating. You walk through the ravaged city where once proud palaces are gutted churches, desecrated and priceless mosaics smashed or stolen. The Hagia Sophia, the magnificent basilica that symbolized Byzantium's religious and imperial glory, is looted and defiled. The population suffers grievously. Many inhabitants are killed enslaved or forced to flee. The city's wealth is plundered, its political institutions shattered. Constantinople, once a beacon of the Roman world's endurance, is left vulnerable and fractured. In the aftermath, the Crusaders established the Latin Empire, a patchwork regime attempting to impose Western feudal structures on a deeply Byzantine society. Their rule is marked by tension and resistance, with Greek Orthodox clergy and nobles striving to maintain their traditions and autonomy. The division further weakens the Byzantine world. Rival Greek states emerge: the Empire of Nicaea, the Despotate of Epirus, and the Empire of Trebizond, each claiming legitimacy and seeking to restore the empire. You visit a monastery where monks secretly preserve Byzantine culture and history, chronicling the fall and dreaming of revival. Their manuscripts, painstakingly copied by candlelight, become the guardians of a vanished world. Despite the destruction, Constantinople's spirit flickers on. In 1261, the Empire of Nicaea recaptures the city, restoring Byzantine rule, but the scars remain. The empire is a shadow of its former self. Its resources depleted, its defenses weakened. The sack of 1204 is often called the death blow. To Byzantium's greatness, a tragedy born not from barbarian hordes but from Christian hands. It symbolizes the fractures between East and West Orthodox and Catholic Empire and Crusade. Yet, paradoxically, it also spreads Byzantine art knowledge and culture westward. Many treasures brought to Western Europe inspire the Renaissance planting seeds that will flourish centuries later. You stroll through the remnants of Byzantine palaces, now scarred by fire and sword, pondering the empire's resilience. Byzantium had survived countless invasions, plagues, and political upheavals. But this internal rupture would haunt it until its final fall. As night descends, you listen to distant chants rising from Orthodox churches, the voices of a people determined to endure. The city's stones remember both glory and grief, empire and exile. And so Constantinople, the last vestige of Rome, limps forward, changed forever, but never forgotten. You walk the uneven streets of the Latin Empire's short-lived capital, Constantinople, in the early 13th century. The grand mosaics are chipped, the golden domes tarnished, and the air carries a mix of foreign tongues and a palpable tension. This Latin Empire is a curious experiment, a Western European feudal kingdom planted forcibly onto Byzantine soil, an alien entity trying to claim the throne of Rome's eastern heir. After the infamous sack of 1204 Venetian merchants, French knights and assorted crusaders divvy up the empire's lands like a broken pie, creating a patchwork realm that barely holds together. The Latin emperors, mostly French or Venetian nobles, wear crowns heavy with symbolism but light on actual power. They rule a city and empire that resists them at every turn. You stroll past marketplaces where Greek merchants whisper in their native tongue, wary of the Latin rulers. Orthodox priests quietly conduct services in defiance of the Catholic hierarchy imposed by the new regime. The cultural divide runs deep as ancient Byzantine customs clash with Western feudal laws. This is a city struggling to balance between two worlds: the Roman heritage that built its walls and the Latin ambition that now governs them. Every street corner feels like a contested battleground between faiths, languages, and identities. Historians still debate how much the Latin Empire contributed to the fragmentation of Byzantine culture versus how much it introduced Western ideas that later influenced Renaissance Europe. You visit a Latin court where nobles bicker over land titles and military campaigns. Alliances shift like sand. The emperor relies heavily on Venetian naval power to keep the city supplied and protected, but the Venetians have their own agendas more interested in trade profits than imperial glory. Quirky detail. The Latin emperors introduced Western-style chivalry tournaments in Constantinople, baffling the local Byzantine nobility who found them both entertaining and bewildering. Meanwhile, rival Byzantine successor states such as the Empire of Nicaea plot to reclaim Constantinople. Their leaders nurture hopes of restoration and cultural revival, organizing armies and diplomatic efforts to undermine Latin rule. You explore the churches, some converted to Western rites, others secretly maintaining Orthodox traditions. The Hagia Sophia, though stripped of treasures, still stands its massive dome, a symbol of endurance amid turmoil. The Latin Empire struggles to impose its authority over a city that sees it as an occupying force. Tax collection is uneven, law enforcement patchy, and civil unrest frequent. You hear tales of local uprisings, conspiracies, and bitter betrayals, underscoring the tenuous grip Latin rulers have on their Roman inheritance. Despite its flaws, the Latin Empire acts as a conduit between East and West. Ideas, art, and goods flow through Constantinople, influencing both cultures in subtle ways. You visit a scriptorium where monks labor over manuscripts, blending Greek and Latin texts, an intellectual fusion sparked by necessity and exchange. Trade continues along ancient routes connecting the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and beyond. Venetian galleys sail in and out of the harbor laden with spices, silks, and precious metals. Outside the city walls, mercenaries and local militias patrol uncertain borders. The threat of invasion from rival states and Turks looms large, forcing constant vigilance. As twilight settles, you find a quiet garden shaded by olive trees where a Byzantine scholar discusses philosophy with a Latin knight. Their conversation is tentative, cautious, but filled with hope. A microcosm of cultural dialogue in a divided empire. The Latin Empire lasts barely 6 decades before Constantinople falls back into Byzantine hands in 1261. Yet its legacy lingers both as a cautionary tale of conquest and as a bridge for ideas between East and West. You leave the city pondering the complexities of identity, power, and survival in a world where Rome's shadow stretches in many directions. The Latin Empire may have been a fleeting chapter, but it is an essential one in the 1,000-year story of Rome's enduring death and rebirth. You find yourself in the waning days of Byzantium, walking the marble halls of the imperial palace in Constantinople. The year is the mid-14th century, and the empire that once proudly called itself Rome's heir is now a shadow of its former self, shrunken, beleaguered, and beset on all sides. The last real Byzantine emperors struggle desperately to hold on to what remains of their ancient dominion, balancing between scholarly pursuits, military crises, and palace intrigue. The empire's grandeur still flickers in these halls. Tapestries woven with imperial dragons hang from stone walls. Byzantine courtiers in sumptuous robes bustle in the corridors carrying scrolls and petitions. In the imperial chapel, prayers are whispered for salvation, both spiritual and worldly. But beneath this surface, the empire's fighting for survival. Its territory has shrunk to a handful of coastal enclaves, and islands constantly threatened by the rising Ottoman Turks from the east and the Latin powers from the west. Emperor John Sixtus Cantacuzene, a philosopher and statesman, tries to navigate this maze of challenges. His rule is marked by civil war, political betrayal, and fragile alliances. He is a scholar king writing treatises on governance and history, even as his armies face defeat. Historians still debate how much these last emperors could have done differently, or if the empire was doomed by forces beyond any ruler's control. You attend a council meeting where generals argue over defensive strategies, while bureaucrats argue about taxation. The empire's finances are in ruins, its military stretched thin and poorly supplied. The once mighty Byzantine navy, the pride of the Mediterranean, is a shadow fleet outmatched by Ottoman galleys and pirate corsairs. Walls that withstood centuries of sieges crumble under neglect. Quirky detail Byzantine court officials maintained a complex protocol involving dozens of ranks and titles, some so obscure they confuse historians trying to untangle who actually held power. You wander the city's famed markets, once overflowing with silks, spices, and gold, now quiet or shadowed by uncertainty. Merchants speak in hushed tones, aware that Constantinople's fall could come at any moment. Yet culture persists. Artists paint icons in brilliant colors, monks copy manuscripts in candlelit rooms, and scholars debate theology and philosophy in the few remaining libraries. The empire's religious identity, centered on Orthodox Christianity, remains a cornerstone of its resilience even as political power fades. You glimpse Empress Anna of Savoy, whose political maneuvering and diplomacy strive to keep the empire afloat in a sea of enemies. Her story is one of ambition and tragedy, reflecting the empire's desperate hope. The Ottomans, meanwhile, grow stronger, their armies disciplined and expanding. They watch Constantinople like a hawk, aware that the city is the key to controlling the eastern Mediterranean. You witness the construction of new fortifications, the training of militia, and the hurried negotiations with neighboring powers seeking allies. The empire's last emperors are scholars and warriors, poets and generals trying to reconcile a glorious past with a precarious present. You listen as a court official recounts tales of earlier emperors, Justinian, Basil II, Constantine the Great, heroes of a lost golden age. These stories fuel the empire's identity and its stubborn refusal to surrender. As night falls, the city's candles flicker in the dusk, and you feel the weight of centuries pressing down. Constantinople's fate hangs in the balance, a relic and beacon of a Roman world, slowly slipping away. And yet in these final days, the empire's spirit endures fragile, proud, and defiant against the inevitable. You lie beneath a vaulted ceiling painted with angels and saints, whispering prayers for a future that may never come. The last real Byzantine emperors are the empire's final chapter of glory before the curtain falls. And in their story, the 1,000-year death of Rome nears its twilight. You stand on the ramparts of Constantinople, the city trembling under the shadow of an approaching storm. Not a weather event, but the advancing Ottoman forces led by Sultan Mehmed II. The year is 1453, and this is the final act in the long, slow death of the Roman Empire. The city, known for over a millennium as New Rome, is about to face a siege that will seal its fate and mark the end of Byzantium. The walls of Constantinople, massive and ancient, have withstood countless attacks. Built by Emperor Theodosius II in the 5th century, they stretch over 6 miles, layered with towers and battlements designed to repel any invader. Yet centuries of warfare, neglect, and internal strife have taken their toll. The defenders number only a few thousand, vastly outnumbered by the Ottoman army, which some estimate at over 80,000. You move through the city streets, witnessing a mix of resolve, fear, and religious devotion. Priests bless soldiers, citizens fortify their homes, and children watch with wide eyes, sensing the gravity of what's to come. Emperor Constantine VII, Palaiologos, the last Byzantine emperor, moves through his troops, inspiring courage and offering prayers. His resolve is legendary. He knows the empire's fate rests on this battle. Historians still debate the exact details of the siege, but what is clear is that this moment was both an end and a beginning. The fall of Constantinople would close the chapter on the Roman Empire's 1,000-year decline, but opened the door to a new era dominated by the Ottomans. The Ottoman army brings with it new technology and tactics. Large cannons, including the famous basilica, bombard the walls relentlessly. The sheer power of these weapons shatters centuries-old defenses, a harsh symbol of changing times. Inside the city, the defenders repair walls by night and fend off assaults by day. The fighting is brutal and relentless. Food supplies dwindle. Morale wavers but never breaks. Quirky detail: the defenders used Greek fire sparingly, a secret Byzantine weapon of flammable liquid, because their stocks were limited and its formula a closely guarded secret lost to time. As the siege progresses, desperate pleas for aid are sent westward. However, Europe is distracted by its own conflicts and religious divisions, and help arrives too late or in insufficient numbers. You witness moments of heroism: soldiers climbing walls, civilians aiding in defense, and the emperor himself fighting alongside his men. There are also tales of betrayal and tragedy, gates opened in secret, fierce hand-to-hand combat, and the roar of fire consuming neighborhoods. On May 29, 1453, after weeks of siege, Ottoman forces breach the walls. The city falls amid chaos and bloodshed. The once glorious capital of the Roman world is taken. You wander through the aftermath: burned buildings, shattered icons, and the haunting silence of a city changed forever. The Hagia Sophia, the heart of Byzantine spiritual life, is converted into a mosque, symbolizing a new chapter. Yet even in defeat, Constantinople's legacy endures. Its fall prompts scholars, artists, and thinkers to flee westward, carrying classical knowledge that will ignite the Renaissance. You feel the weight of centuries as you walk these ruined streets, the end of an era, but the seed of a new one. The thousand-year death of the Roman Empire concludes here on the shores of the Bosporus, beneath walls that once seemed eternal. And though the empire falls, its spirit will echo through history, shaping worlds yet to come. You find yourself standing within the ornate, shadowed halls of the Ottoman Topkapi Palace, gazing out across the glittering expanse of Istanbul, a city reborn from the ashes of Constantinople. It is the 16th century, and the Ottoman sultans have woven the legacy of Rome into their own imperial tapestry, blending conquest, administration, and culture into a formidable empire. Though the Roman Empire has long since fallen, its spirit lives on here in unexpected ways. The Ottomans are masters of adaptation. They inherited the Byzantine bureaucracy, Roman laws, and even architectural marvels, but infused them with Islamic principles and Turkish traditions. The palace buzzes with advisors, scribes, and soldiers, all working in concert to manage a vast realm that stretches from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire's most famous ruler, commands with a mix of absolute authority and enlightened governance. He's a patron of the arts, a reformer of laws, and a military genius. Under his reign, the Ottoman Empire reaches its zenith, embodying a synthesis of Roman legacy and Islamic power. You walk through the city's mosques and marketplaces, where Byzantine churches have been transformed into places of Islamic worship. The Hagia Sophia, now a mosque, stands as a symbol of this transformation, a magnificent structure bridging two great civilizations. Ottoman architecture pays homage to Roman and Byzantine styles. You marvel at the soaring domes, intricate tile work, and majestic arches that recall Constantinople's golden age, yet speak in a new language of faith and imperial grandeur. Historians still debate how deeply Roman identity survived within Ottoman culture. Some argue the empire was a complete break. Others see a continuous thread of administrative and cultural inheritance. In the imperial courts, Greek and Armenian bureaucrats serve alongside Turkish officials, a testament to the empire's multicultural makeup. Roman legal traditions influence Ottoman law codes, which combine Sharia with local customs. You witness a grand ceremony where the Sultan receives envoys from Europe and Asia, his court a dazzling display of power and diplomacy. The Ottomans see themselves as the rightful heirs to Roman, and indeed universal authority guardians of both Islam and civilization. Trade flourishes. Istanbul is a hub connecting east and west, attracting merchants from Venice to Persia. The city's markets overflow with spices, silks, and precious metals, echoing Constantinople's ancient wealth. Quirky detail. Ottoman sultans wore crowns inspired by Byzantine designs but adorned them with feathers and jewels, unique to their culture, a visual blend of past and present. Despite their power, the Ottomans face challenges. Internal factions vie for influence, religious scholars debate interpretations of law, and European rivals plot against them. You stroll through libraries where scholars preserve not only Islamic texts but also ancient Greek and Roman manuscripts, continuing the tradition of knowledge preservation. The empire's military innovations, elite Janissary corps, advanced artillery combine ancient strategies with modern tactics, allowing it to dominate for centuries. As night falls, the call to prayer rises over Istanbul's skyline, mingling with the distant tolling of church bells, a harmony born of history's layers. You reflect on the journey from Rome's fall through Byzantium's twilight to Ottoman dawn. The empire's death was not an end but a transformation, its legacy evolving and enduring in new forms. And so the Roman spirit, like the city itself, rises and falls, changes and endures forever, shaping the world's tapestry. You stroll through the bustling streets of Renaissance Rome, a city reborn from centuries of decay, dust, and dynastic struggles. The year is 1500 CE, and the Eternal City pulses once again with artistic fervor, political ambition, and religious power. The ruins of ancient Rome, long silent witnesses to empire and empire's fall, now serve as both inspiration and foundation for a city reinventing itself. Rome's skyline is a stunning juxtaposition of crumbling aqueducts, towering new churches, and the looming presence of the Vatican. The papacy, having grown from spiritual leadership into a formidable political entity, wields influence not only over souls but over kings and princes. The popes have embraced the arts as a way to manifest divine glory on earth and to assert their earthly power. You walk past the newly completed dome of St. Peter's Basilica, an architectural marvel designed by Bramante Michelangelo and others. Its soaring arches and intricate details echo the grandeur of the Roman pantheon, but surpass it in scale and spiritual ambition. Every stone, every fresco speaks of a city striving to reclaim its place at the center of the Christian world. Artists like Michelangelo, Raphael, and Leonardo da Vinci roam the city, commissioned by popes and noble families alike, to create works that marry classical ideals with Christian themes. Their masterpieces grace chapels, palaces, and public squares, blending myth and faith in ways that redefine beauty and power. Historians still argue whether the Renaissance truly revived the spirit of Rome or merely repackaged it for new patrons and new politics. But walking these streets, you can feel the pulse of continuity, the ancient empire's ideals reshaped and reborn. Politics is as vibrant as the art. The papal court is a hive of intrigue, with families like the Borgias and Medici vying for influence through alliances, marriages, and sometimes poison. The Pope balances spiritual duties with the ruthless necessities of statecraft. You enter the Vatican library shelves groaning with manuscripts, ancient texts rescued from Byzantine monks, fleeing the Ottoman advanced classical works preserved and rediscovered. This repository of knowledge fuels the intellectual awakening spreading across Europe. Rome is also a city of pilgrims and tourists. Merchants hawk relics and souvenirs while pilgrims crowd into churches hoping for miracles. The economy hums with trade art markets and religious festivals. Quirky detail. Renaissance popes sometimes threw lavish banquets where guests were entertained by exotic animals, acrobats and musicians showcasing wealth and divine favor in equal measure. Yet beneath the splendor tensions simmer. The Protestant Reformation looms at the horizon, challenging the authority of the Church and threatening the city's spiritual monopoly. You observe debates in university halls where scholars wrestle with faith, science, and humanism, a philosophical revolution rooted in rediscovering ancient texts but questioning old doctrines. Rome's streets are alive with the scent of fresh paint-heated debates and the clang of chisels shaping marble. The city's ancient stones, weathered but unbroken, provide a canvas for this new chapter. You visit the ruins of the Roman Forum, imagining Julius Caesar and Cicero debating laws and empire. Now artists sketch among the columns, finding in these remnants a source of endless inspiration. The Renaissance transforms Rome into a vibrant fusion of past and present. It is a city that acknowledges its imperial roots while boldly forging a new identity. And through all this, the legacy of Rome endures not as a fallen empire, but as a wellspring of culture, faith, and power shaping the modern world. As twilight descends, you stand atop the Janiculum Hill, overlooking a city where history lives, breathes, and creates anew. Rome's story, it seems, is far from over. You find yourself on the grassy banks of the Tiber River, the evening sun casting long shadows over a city both ancient and ever-changing. Rome has endured countless cycles of rise, fall, and rebirth, but now you face one of the most perplexing questions of history. When did Rome actually die? Or perhaps better put, when did Rome stop being Rome? The question might seem simple at first. You could point to 476 CE, when the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed, or to 1453 CE, when Constantinople fell to the Ottomans, marking the definitive end of the Eastern Roman Empire. But the truth is far messier, tangled in centuries of transformation, identity shifts, and political reconfigurations. You walk through the ruins of the Forum where senators once argued laws that shaped the known world. Now, pigeons coo among broken columns and tourists snap pictures. The empire that built these monuments has long gone, but its stones speak across the ages. Historians still argue fiercely over the death of Rome. Some see it as a series of gradual declines, a fading light, dimmed by economic troubles, barbarian invasions, and internal decay. Others argue for moments of rebirth when new powers claim the Roman mantle, reshaping it for their own eras. You find yourself contemplating the Roman Empire's identity. Was it a geographic realm, a political system, a cultural ideal, or a blend of all? The answer changes depending on who holds power and who tells the story. For centuries after 476, rulers like Theodoric the Ostrogoth wore Roman titles, minted coins with imperial portraits, and maintained Roman laws. The Byzantine emperors, speaking Greek and ruling from Constantinople, called themselves Romans, even as their empire's character shifted dramatically. The Holy Roman Empire, beginning with Charlemagne in 800 CE, claimed Rome's legacy in name and ritual, but it was a very different beast, medieval, fragmented, and deeply influenced by Germanic traditions. You stroll past medieval cathedrals built on Roman foundations, where Latin liturgies echo through stone halls. The city itself is a palimpsest of histories, pagan temples converted to churches, palaces, built atop forums, roads that trace ancient Roman roots. Rome's death is not a single event, but a 1,000-year process of transformation, adaptation, and reinterpretation. Quirky detail, even in the 19th century when Italy unified kings sought to connect themselves symbolically to Rome's imperial past, wearing laurel wreaths and commissioning statues that evoked Caesar and Augustus. You visit a modern museum housing artifacts from all eras of Rome's long story. You see a Roman legionary's helmet, A Byzantine mosaic, a Renaissance painting, and a modern photograph of the city all connected in an unbroken thread. The idea of Rome more than the empire itself is the true legacy. It's a symbol of law, order, civilization, and cultural achievement that transcends borders and epochs. You reflect on how Rome's institutions, its legal codes, engineering feats, administrative systems still underpin much of the modern world. Roads, languages, city planning, governance all bear traces of Rome's influence. As night falls, you stand atop the Palatine Hill, looking out over the city lights twinkling like stars. The Colosseum's silhouette rises against the darkening sky, a monument to an empire that never truly dies. Rome's story is a paradox, a death that was a beginning, a fall that was a transformation, a legacy that is eternal. And as you breathe in the ancient air, you realize that you are sitting on Roman bones, part of a living continuum, stretching back millennia and far into the future. The empire's thousand-year death is not a story of an end, but of endless rebirth. You find yourself walking through the quiet streets of a modern city built on millennia of history, where every cobblestone archway and fountain whispers tales of the past. This city, Rome, still breathes with the life of empires long gone, and yet it is vibrantly alive, a living testament to endurance and transformation. You sit on a bench near a restored Roman aqueduct, feeling the smooth, worn stone beneath your fingertips, pondering the story you have journeyed through the thousand-year death of the Roman Empire, a saga of slow, fading, fierce survival and endless rebirth. You realize something profound. Rome never truly died. It changed form, shifted identity, and passed through countless hands, each adding layers to its complex legacy. The empire's death was not a sudden collapse, but a thousand small deaths of emperors, cities, armies, cultures woven together over centuries. As you watch the sunset paint the sky in golden hues, you think about all the ways Rome persists in everyday life. Your plumbing, for instance, a marvel of engineering inherited from Roman aqueducts and sewage systems, designed millennia ago to bring water and sanitation to vast populations. The roads beneath your feet echo the Roman emphasis on infrastructure and connectivity, enabling trade travel and communication. Your laws and governments bear the imprint of Roman legal thought. Concepts like citizenship contracts and trial by jury trace roots to Roman jurisprudence, a foundation of Western civilization. Even the languages spoken around you, Italian, Spanish, French, descend directly from Latin, Rome's tongue. Quirky detail, the Roman calendar modified slightly lives on in your modern system. July and August still honor Julius Caesar and Augustus emperors who shaped history. You reflect on architecture, the domes, arches, and columns that define so many cities inspired by Roman designs. Public spaces that invite gathering and discourse, echoing the Roman Forum's spirit of community. And of course, art and culture. The Renaissance's revival of classical ideals was a reawakening of Rome's creative soul, carried forward by artists and thinkers who found inspiration in its ruins and manuscripts. You think about the empire's darker legacies too, the bloodshed of conquest, the complexity of power, and the struggles of identity and belonging. Rome was never perfect, but its story is human, full of triumph, failure, innovation, and resilience. As the city's lights twinkle to life, you hear the distant toll of church bells mingling with the hum of modern life. The past and present coalesce, a continuum shaped by the Romans, but carried forward by countless others. You sit back and let your mind drift, feeling connected to the millions who walked these streets before you. The senators, soldiers, slaves, emperors, and citizens. Their hopes, fears, and dreams are etched into the city's fabric. Rome's thousand-year death is a tapestry of endings and beginnings, a reminder that history is never static. It is alive, breathing through us, waiting to be rediscovered and reinterpreted. And as night deepens, you feel a quiet comfort in this continuity. The Empire's legacy is not just in stones or stories, but in you, in the laws you live by, the streets you walk, the language you speak. The story of Rome is your story, too. You close your eyes, surrounded by the whispers of history, and breathe deeply. Wherever you are, this legacy connects us all across time and space. And so, as the city sleeps, you rest with it. Part of a living tradition, a thousand-year journey that continues softly, endlessly. Now, as we draw this journey to a gentle close, take a deep breath and let the centuries of history settle softly around you. Imagine the warmth of the Roman sun fading into twilight, the echoes of ancient voices blending with the quiet hum of the present. Rome's story, winding and complex, is less a tale of endings and more a meditation on transformation. The empire's stones may crumble and its banners may fall, but its spirit lingers in law, language, art, and the very rhythms of our lives. It teaches us about resilience, how even the mightiest can change, adapt, and live on in new forms. The thousand-year death of Rome reminds us that history isn't just about distant pasts. It's alive within us, shaping who we are and who we might become. So as you close your eyes tonight, let yourself drift into dreams, touched by marble arches and quiet forums where past and present mingle in a peaceful dance. Feel the steady pulse of an empire that never truly dies but lives on in stories and stone, in the soft whisper of the wind. I'll be here with another story for you tomorrow night. Good night and sweet dreams.